Hello and welcome to session 4 of the Mindfulness mini course. So far in the first part of our course, we've been exploring learning to concentrate. And we've been practicing the skills that we can utilize to do that. Today I want to talk about some principles that are really important in the practice. Because the skills, as you've discovered, are really simple. We all know how, when the doctor says, what kind of pain is it in your finger? We all know how to direct our attention there so that we can answer the question as best we can. We're all capable of feeling the breath and the body and listening and looking. But when we start to practice this, then quickly, because it's so simple, the mind can get bored and start to say, okay, I've got that. What's the advanced teaching? What's the level 2 teaching? And for many years I've said that there is none. And I've come to see that that's not quite true. It's true in the fact that our practice remains really basic. But that as we practice and layers of mind are stripped away, layers of confusion and delusion are stripped away, we start to become open to different sorts of questions and different sorts of inner exploration that aren't possible for most of us at the very beginning. There are stories of people like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie, who I really love, who've just experienced unconscious insanity for years to a deep, deep level of suffering, and then have woken up completely in a really short space of time and without a real inner path. But for the rest of us, we're not coming to this seemingly miraculously all in one moment or 1 month. We're discovering, we're slogging, we're pushing through the forest. There's a very dark forest at times, and trying to find our way through. So as we do that, as the forest starts to thin, then we can see a little further, and we can look at some different things. But the reality is that our practice is about repetition. It's about 5, 10, 100,000 times a day noticing that you're lost in thought and bringing attention back to body, breath, and awareness. And it's settling into this ongoing life of simplicity that's incredibly difficult for mind identified people as we are at this point in our journey. So as we learn to concentrate, it's really important that we just focus on repetition and regularity. They're the things that will pay dividends in our practice. We don't want to get fancy and start contemplating the existential nature of oneness. We just need to sit and breathe and look and listen and feel. So you've been doing that this week, And it's likely already that your mind is trying to throw you off the scent. It's trying to complicate things, or is trying to keep you from sitting down and practicing on a daily basis. So today's written exercise is there to help you explore that. And I hope you'll take some time to do that now. But before you do, let me say that this practice, in Zen, a few years ago I read about it as being like learning to bake bread. That, most people after a couple of goes can make a serviceable loaf. But that if you want to be a master, you need to practice it day in and day out under different conditions and learn the process inside out. And more than that, you have to do it consciously. And so, as we continue on this journey, we need to keep coming back to that simplicity and that repetition, that we're not trying to become rocket scientists. We're trying to become world-class bakers, which is probably just as difficult. So I started telling you about the start of my journey and reading books and spinning my wheels in the mud. And I was traveling through South America and Central America with my girlfriend, and I was really bogged. I kept reading the Dalai Lama, I kept reading another book by a Thai or a monk who was trained in Thailand. And, they both had different definitions and cultural ideas and practices. And I was really shopping around. I was trying a bit of this practice, a bit of that practice, a bit of the other. And then I walked into this second-hand bookshop in Guatemala and just randomly picked up this book called Everyday Zen. And it was, super cheap. So I bought it, and I had it for about the next 10 years. And this book, I didn't really understand it at the time, but it was so simple and so just elegant in its description of this practice as just sitting and learning to breathe. And something about that Zen approach to this inner journey grabbed me from that moment and has really never let go. And so a few months later I returned to Australia, and I immediately found this Zen school. And when I'd been in Guatemala, when I started reading this book, I got on the internet at the hostel, and it was back in the days when web pages took 5 minutes to load and you could go and do something else and have a cup of tea and come back and it'd still be loading. And I read this article about Zen and I thought, yeah, that's cool. And then I got back to Australia, I found a school, I started doing these day retreats and bits and pieces, and then I realized 6 months later that the teacher at this school was the man that I'd read interviewed on this web page when I was sitting in Guatemala, and I had no idea. And this teacher, he was very kind and very helpful, but very simple and straightforward. And his only advice was he would tell you how to sit, hold your back straight, and then simply breathe. And that's all he would say. And my mind really struggled with that because I wanted to know, what do I do next? I'm breathing. I know how to do that. It's pretty simple. I'm sitting. So what do I do next? And what I realized over years of sitting on the cushion was that doing that well, just sitting with back straight, keeping the correct hand position for that practice and breathing and not doing anything else is about the hardest thing in the world. Because as soon as I'd start to drift, I'd slump, my hands would move, I'd have to come back. So it wasn't simple, it wasn't easy at all. It was simple in that there wasn't a lot of complexity in it, but the complexity was in my mind. And that's what you'll probably find too. So if you have found yourself shopping around and getting caught in complexity, then I urge you to use these exercises that we've been practicing this week and just stick to them only. Set a timer, sit, breathe, feel, and then when it's done, forget about it. Get on with your day. Keep that awareness where you can, but don't spend the rest of the day thinking about it. Just bring awareness to everything else that you do through the day. I've talked enough for this session, so I'd like to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me on this mini course and on this journey. And tomorrow we're going to wrap up our first stage, learning to concentrate. And we're going to bridge our way into our second stage, which I'll tell you more about tomorrow. Thanks for joining me, and take some time to do today's written exercise as well. And I'll speak with you soon.